Hey guys, welcome to Travel Fields. Today we're talking about the holy grail of Canon DSLRs, the Canon 1DX Mark II. First off, I just want to talk about Buffer Festival last weekend. I was at the Buffer Festival here in Toronto. It's a YouTube festival, basically. A bunch of YouTubers, a bunch of creators come there and just hang out. There's screenings, all sorts of cool stuff. I just had a really good time there. It was really nice hanging out and meeting new people like Chris Howe, Sarah Dici, John Hill. It's just really cool to meet new creators that are doing their own thing, have their own channels, and they're just hustling. I really enjoy meeting new people like that. But the big takeaway from Buffer Festival was actually that there's a face behind every single number on YouTube. And I kind of just had that realization of, oh man, yeah, like there's 160,000 of you, but there's actually 160,000 people. And when you guys came up and wanted to talk and all that, it was really cool just putting some faces to some of those numbers. It was a really cool experience, I think. It's the first time I've had real contact with my subscribers, so that was super cool. So next year, if you guys want to hang out, make sure you're at the Buffer Festival. I'm sure I'll probably be there too. Alright, so let's get into the review of the Canon 1DX Mark II, and right off the bat, this is not a scientific review. I'm never gonna do scientific reviews, that's just not my style. But what I did do is take the 1DX to Norway with me on a shoot for a week, and that's really how you find out if it's a good camera for you or not. So let's check out some of the footage from Norway. So for me, I'm still kind of looking for the perfect YouTube camera. I don't always want to be lugging around this camera, the C300 Mark II, just because it's a big camera and it just doesn't work really well for vlogging type stuff and all that, obviously, because it's just too big, too heavy. So I've been testing different cameras like the GH5 and the Sonys, and then some of these Canons, and figuring what's the best camera for me for YouTube filmmaking where I need a smaller form factor camera. So let's just go through some of the pros and cons of the 1DX that I found while I was shooting with it. And first off, let's just talk functionality. First off, the size of the camera. A lot of people say that the 1DX is just way too big, and I actually like the size. I'm used to a little bit bigger cameras, but I found that the size of it and the weight of it made for really smooth, really nice footage because it's not so light and jittery in your hands all the time. It has a little bit of weight to it. So the handheld stuff feels a little bit better, and it's just really nice to shoot with. Having that nice grip and a little bit bigger size, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was going to be a big pain, but I really enjoyed this. So for me, this was actually a pro, but for some of you, it could be a con. But I also like it that I can still stick it on my Glidecam 2000 or on a gimbal. It's still small enough and light enough that it's not too big for the stabilizers. Then we have the battery life, and the battery life is just amazing on the 1DX Mark II. Now granted, the batteries are pretty hefty, they're pretty big, especially compared to the other Canon batteries or Sony batteries or any of the other batteries. They're a lot bigger, but I would way rather have a little bit bigger battery and have way longer battery life because I just don't want to be changing batteries all the time. Or I don't want to be in the middle of shooting with my Glidecam and then have to take it off, or on a gimbal, take it off and then switch in a new battery and all that. I love having a really long-lasting battery. Now, the one big downside to having bigger batteries is that you have a bigger charger, which is kind of annoying when you're traveling and all that. I just really like minimizing the amount of stuff I bring along, and so that's a little bit of a con for me. Next, let's talk about menus. Menus don't seem like they're that big of a deal, but it really matters when you're shooting because you're always going to be going into menus, and if you're always having to fight with the menus and you can't find stuff, it just really sucks, and it just hurts the shooting experience. But with Canon, the menus have always been really good and intuitive. It's just really easy to find stuff. I really like how easy it is to just switch into 120, super fast. You can just go back and forth. Now there's one thing that annoys me, and that's when you go out of 120 frames per second, it defaults to 60 frames per second. And I'd way rather it go to 24 frames per second because that's really all I'm switching between is 120 and then 24. So that's a little bit of an annoying thing, but overall the menus are really nice. Downside for most people is that it takes CFast cards, which are really expensive cards, but for me, I actually have a bunch of CFast cards because of my C300, so for me it's actually a pro because I like using the same cards on different cameras, but I could definitely see why this would be a negative for a lot of people because they are expensive. And functionality wise, I'd say the biggest downside is that it doesn't have a flip LCD screen. I keep saying this, every single small form factor camera nowadays should have a flip LCD screen. There's no reason why it shouldn't have a flip LCD screen. Photographers benefit, videographers benefit, everybody benefits. Everybody wants flip LCD screens. So I'd say that's probably the biggest downside functionality wise is that it doesn't have a flip LCD screen. And then let's talk image. Now this is always the juicy stuff for me, and in the end this is the most important stuff. I mean, all the functionality and all that stuff really matters, but the image is what I care about most. So I actually shot almost everything in 1080. When I was vlogging, I was shooting in 24, 1080, and then I was shooting a lot in 120 frames per second, which is in 1080, but it has a really nice codec. So not all slow motion is equal. Just because the GH5 can do 120 frames per second and the 1DX Mark II can do 120 frames per second, it doesn't look quite the same. And that's the same for Sony. They all look a little bit different. And I think this 120 frames per second in the 1DX Mark II is really, really nice. One of the nicest, if not the nicest, in these smaller form factor cameras. And that's just because it's shooting in a really high bit rate, so the quality of that 1080 is really high. So 120 frames per second, super nice on this camera. I basically shot all the time in 120 frames per second. If I was going for B-roll, 120. I really like shooting in slow motion. And one of the best things about the 1DX Mark II is the autofocus on it. And it even works in the 120 frames per second. So just by yourself, you can get all these really cool shots of just, you know, dollying in on your characters or just going around and going backward. You don't have to keep the same distance all the time like I normally would when I'm shooting in manual focus. And I still think Canon by far has the best autofocus, and the 1DX Mark II, it's really good. No focus puller needed. You just use the autofocus and you can get really cool shots. Okay, so it's really good for nice, beautiful cinematic shots, but what is it like for the rest of YouTube filmmaking, which is a lot of talking to the camera and vlogging and that kind of stuff? And surprisingly, I actually really enjoyed using the 1DX. I thought it was gonna be super crazy heavy when I'm holding it out, especially for vlogging. I mean, there's definitely times where it gets a little bit tiring, but it wasn't so bad. And because of a little bit of weight to the camera, I feel like it's a little bit more stable in my hands. And so I really liked it. And I thought because it doesn't have a flip LCD screen, I was gonna really just be annoyed the whole time. But basically what I would do is just hold out my hand and I'd get exposure on that. And then I just turn it around, film myself, and as long as I'm looking right down the barrel of the lens, I know I'm in focus. The autofocus is in the center frame, so I'm just looking right down the middle. I know it's gonna be in focus. I know it's gonna be good. Plus, the big reason why a lot of people shoot Canon is the Colorscience. It just looks so good, which is so handy for vlogging. Because when you're doing YouTube, you're vlogging, whatever, you're putting out videos all the time, you don't wanna spend a lot of time fighting with the footage to make the colors look really good, especially skin tones. And Canon just really has that down, so it just helps so much in the editing process when you're filming on a camera like the 1DX. It just saves you so much time in color grading. And one of the biggest reasons I really like the 1DX Mark II is that it's full frame. There's a really big difference when you're shooting with something like the GH5 and then the 1DX Mark II, which is full frame. So the GH5 is crop censored. I think it's like times 2 without the speed booster. With the speed booster, it's about a 1.6 crop. and I just really like the look of full frame. You just get this nice depth, this drama in your shots, and the depth of field is way nicer than on the GH5. So some of the shots I was getting were just so nice because of that wide perspective, and I just look back around the camera and be like, oh man, I can't wait to edit this stuff. But also for vlogging, it makes it a lot easier. You can just hold it out not even that far from your face, and you can get everything, whereas with the GH5, you really have to push it far because it's crop censored, it's not as wide. So for vlogging, having a full frame sensor really actually helps a lot, which is something that I didn't really think about that much, but using it, I realized how important it actually is. And then I started thinking maybe the 60 is actually a pretty good vlogging camera. Even though it doesn't do 4K, it might actually be good because it's full frame, especially because of the flip LCD screen. That'd be interesting. Then when we're talking about image, the downsides I would say are the 4K codec is just not the best codec, so I wasn't really shooting in 4K. I don't really like it as a 4K camera, but for my YouTube stuff, I don't actually need 4K most of the time. I would rather just do 1080, especially because the slow motion is always in 1080 anyways, so I'm just gonna make the whole thing 1080 when I'm doing these quick YouTube videos. But I would say the biggest downside of the 1DX Mark II is the dynamic range. The dynamic range just isn't as good as it could be. I think it could be a lot better, especially coming from something like the C300 where the dynamic range is just so good. Then going to something like the 1DX, the dynamic range just isn't quite there. It's a lot more challenging, especially if you're shooting in harsh light. It just doesn't look as good. You're always gonna have something blowing out or something way too dark, and it's a little bit challenging in that way. I really wish it had C-Log so we get a little bit more dynamic range out of the camera. And then quickly, photo-wise, it's obviously just a beast of a camera. The photos that I was taking with this is just unreal. It's just a really good photo camera. I'm not surprised that so many people like Peter use the 1DX, especially for photos. Alright, so the big question always is, who is this camera for? Every camera these days, pretty much every camera, is a really good camera. The real question is just who it's best for. So who should get the 1DX Mark II? I would say it's not a beginner camera. I wouldn't get it if I was just starting out. I don't think you should be putting 6,000 down on a camera right away when you're starting out. You're way better off using something like a 6D or 5D or 80D or a GH5 or something like that. So if you're a beginner, I would say pass on this for now, work on your stuff, and then once you've made some money, maybe then invest in this. Who I think it's really the best for is people like me, YouTubers, who are trying to make really cinematic content, and then you're also trying to get really high quality photos at the same time. Especially if you want to do slow-mo heavy stuff, which is what I do for a lot of the B-roll. So this camera is really ideal for someone like me. It's no surprise to me that people like Peter and Sam Colder and Taylor Cut Films and Lost LeBlanc, all of them shoot on the 1DX Mark II, and I really understand now why they shoot on it. You have one camera that's just so capable of so many different things. So I would say this is not a beginner camera. Wait till you've gotten a little bit better. But if you really want to push the cinematics in your films and get amazing photos, this camera is definitely for you. I might even get one for myself. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate if you were part of this community. Guys, enjoy the filmmaking process and go get some of those travel feels.